Hello and welcome back to iRacing for week 8 of the BMW 12.0 challenge, this week coming to you from Watkins Glen. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat this one, I'm just going to get straight to the point and tell you this video is not going to end well. If you're a sim racing purist, then viewer discretion is strongly advised because you're going to see me make a mistake so catastrophic that it takes out half the grid. But there's no point shying away from it. Sometimes you've just got to hold your hands up, admit that you made a huge mistake, apologise to all the drivers involved and try and learn from the mistakes. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves because first I just wanted to share some highlights from my afternoon racing and the events that led up to the disaster in question. We're going to head over now to the formation lap of my first race this afternoon, and you'll have seen from the qualifying times just then that I actually put it 8th on the grid. I was really encouraged by that qualifying performance because this is a single split field, so the competition is really high, and the fact that I managed to put it on the 4th row was really pleasing. And the other thing that I was really pleased about was being on the outside line as well into T1. There's a huge runoff area at turn 1 and iRacing is quite generous with its off tracks there as well, so you can run pretty wide and not pick up an incident point. So that was really comforting because I knew if it did get a bit frisky in turn 1, I had the option of just drifting it out wide to try and avoid any trouble. And as the lights go green, you see we get away fairly well and we're in touch with the front 7. And we approach turn 1 here. There's a couple of cars having a look up the inside, but like I say, that doesn't worry me too much. I know I've got the safety net of the runoff area, but I don't actually need it. I've lost 2 positions, but we've got around turn 1 safely, and that's the thing that's most important at the moment. So I'm really happy with the way things are going after these first few corners. But then, all of a sudden, we see a huge cloud of smoke ahead, and for a couple of seconds we lose all visibility. I have to ease off the gas slightly, and that invites the car behind to make a move up the inside. I know he's there, so I brake a little bit earlier, and whack, I take a huge jump from behind, which sends me right into the barrier. Now, thankfully, all the oncoming traffic had safely passed through that inner loop by the time my car slid across it, so there was no harm done to anyone else, just to me. Not only did I lose loads of time and have to rejoin in second to last position, but my car had picked up some fairly serious damage and it was on the verge of being undrivable. We can take a look at the replay now, and that crash in front really disorientated me. I had no idea what was going to be waiting for me on the other side of that cloud of smoke, so I did ease off the gas slightly. That invited the car behind to make a move up the inside. I couldn't really go anywhere, so I had to brake a bit earlier, and the car behind, I think it just caught him out. He was a bit later on the brakes. He hit me really hard, and within half a lap, my hopes of a top 10 finish had taken a pretty big nosedive. We're now riding on board with the number 14 car. He was the driver behind me who hit me, and I'm not going to be too critical here because I did brake an awful lot earlier than I normally would. I was worried about the car on the inside. I also had a car in front of me and I just caught him out, I think. It certainly didn't look like he was out of control because he made the chicane okay, although perhaps I did help him slow down a little bit. As we look at it again from the chopper view, it was a fairly big hit and it just sent me careering into the barrier. And yeah, a really frustrating end because I had high hopes for this race after my good qualifying performance and I knew there were good championship points up for grabs. But no, instead, we're now in second to last position and yeah, the car is handling really badly. When I did finally try and get back up to speed, I was lapping between 2 and 3 seconds a lap slower than I was in qualifying, and I was pushing as hard as I could, but the handling just wasn't there. Now, if you look at the relative board, you'll have seen that there was a driver in the pits as we went down the start and finish straight, so that has given us 1 position back. We're up to 14th. However, we've got Simon Flynn closing in on us fast. Now, Simon was the driver who lost control on the first lap, just at the section we're approaching now. He was in front of me on the grid, so I know he's got a better pace than me, and I also know that I'm running with quite a bit of damage, so I almost leave a gap open on the inside here to invite him through, and he takes up the opportunity, so I just ease off a little bit early again, let him through safely because I know the chances of me keeping up with him are pretty non-existent. And as we watch Simon pull off into the distance, it's a good opportunity to have a look at the replay of his accident, and without wanting to give away any spoilers, it's eerily similar to the mistake I'm going to make in the next race. He just gives it a little bit too much gas coming out of that turn. The tyres are cold and there's no traction control to save you. And luckily for Simon, he manages to spin away from the oncoming traffic, so there's no harm done. Back to the race, and we're just about to start lap 4, and you'll see that Simon's caught the 13th place driver Tim Moffat, and he makes a move up the inside of the final turn. That pushes Tim a little bit offline and it slows him down, so suddenly we've got a chance to close in on him, and you never know, we might be able to gain a position here if we can get a little bit closer. Just going into turn 1, Tim runs it a little bit wide. Now I said earlier that there's a huge runoff area here, and normally you can maintain your speed, but Tim gets off the gas and that lets us through, so now we're back into that 14th position. We're going to fast forward a couple of laps to the start of lap 6, and I'd managed to reel in the car in 13th, Cornelius, and as we approach turn 1, it's my turn to run it in a little hot and go wide, but like I say, you can keep the gas on so you don't really lose any time, and you certainly don't lose an incident point. So I'm right on Cornelius's tail here, and I'm hoping with a bit of draft I might be able to counteract some of the damage and get a good speed out, but I'm just not quite close enough to tuck into his slipstream. And as we race up to this tricky inner loop, watch Cornelius. He's carrying way too much corner speed into this chicane. It gets him all out of shape and he's run wide. He's into the gravel. I almost follow him in. I'm concentrating on him more than I am my own line. But thankfully, I managed to get it back on track, minus an incident point. But we've gained a position. We're up to 13th place. However, with the gap growing ahead of me, I knew this was about as good as it was going to get unless other drivers would make mistakes, and thankfully several came to my aid. This was further up the field, a three-way battle for the top 10, and it ended in disaster. Again, the inner loop claiming another victim. Keep your eye on the car at the back of this trio. He's looking for a space anywhere he can. In the end, he goes for the inside, and there's just not room. There's big contact, and two of the cars crash out. If we watch it again from the overhead view, we'll see that the car in front actually didn't make it that easy for him. He was weaving all over the place and seemed a bit indecisive over which line he was going to take into that chicane. And yeah, it invited the move up the inside. The space wasn't really there and both of them crash out. Fast forward another lap and there's another driver getting up close and personal with the Watkins Glen barriers. This time we're on the penultimate corner and it's the number 10 car who just drifts out onto the grass, and once you do that you're a passenger. The car's out of control and he hits the wall hard. So that's another visitor to the pits for repairs, and we're going to see a couple more before the race is out. Back at the inner loop again. This time we're watching the car on the outside. He just clips the grass and it sends him out of control and right in to the car on the inside. Both of them hit the wall hard and pick up severe damage. Yeah, the second that these M4s clip the grass, they seem to take on a mind of their own, and there's very little that you can do to save it, and it costs both these drivers dearly. So that brings us to the final lap, and with all those accidents happening in front of me, I actually climbed up to 11th position, and then even on the last lap, one of the drivers with damage decided to quit, so I gained another position, and I'm going to cross the line in 10th place, so incredibly, a top 10 finish, which seemed pretty impossible after that first lap shunt on the approach to the inner loop. However, if you watched my video from Brands Hatch last week, you'll know that I came back to do a second race in the evening when there's a bigger field, and crucially 2 splits. Because I'm in the lower bracket of iRacing, I tend to get put in the second split when there's a bigger field, and that suits me fine because it gives me a bit more confidence that I can be competitive racing against drivers of a similar ability. Now, last week at Brands, I managed to pick up my first ever pole position, and guess what? I've only gone and done it again. However, if you did watch that video, you'll also know that the pressure got to me very quickly and I managed to crash out in turn 1 after taking the whole shot, throwing away my chance of a first ever victory. I said straight after that race that I just needed to look at the positives. I needed to learn from my mistake, and if I ever got into the same position again, not to make the same mistake again. Well, 1 week on, I've got the chance to right those wrongs. I'm starting from pole position for the second week in a row, and I've got an excellent chance to redeem myself.
Get ready, going green.
Now, last week's mistake was caused by me carrying just a little bit too much corner speed into T1 and also shifting down to third gear just a little bit too soon. So that's at the forefront of my mind. Do not make the same mistake again. Luckily, I get away really well. Look at the gap behind me already. It allows me to get over to my preferred racing line, and I've got no pressure at all. So I'm really cautious getting around this first turn. Take it easy, and we've done it. I can't even begin to describe the weight that was lifted off my shoulders as we exited that first turn. And look at the gap behind. I've opened up a 0.8 of a second lead. But if complacency creeps in, disaster strikes.
You've got some damage. Let's get that fixed.
It's difficult to describe how I was feeling at this moment as I lay there upside down. Horror, embarrassment, guilt. I mean, I've made mistakes before, but never on this scale. The drivers in second and third position managed to get through safely, but the rest of the field weren't so lucky. We're riding on board with the guy in fourth. He just couldn't get around in time, and he was the first person to hit me as I slid back across the track. And as you can see, he's lost all visibility because his bonnet's up. It finally comes down just as he approaches the inner loop. Let's take another look at the replay and see how it affected some of the drivers a bit further down the grid. Now, I'm fairly new to sim racing, and of course I've made mistakes, but I've never taken out half the field before with such a catastrophic error. And I don't really know what else to say. Obviously, I had to get a tow back to the pits, and in that time I apologised profusely in the race chat to anyone that I affected. A couple of guys accepted the apology. Most didn't. Most called me every name under the sun, which I guess I deserved. And if by any chance any of the drivers involved find this video, I'd just like to apologise again, because I'm utterly ashamed of this error. But the main reason for me sharing this with you guys today is that I want to learn from my mistakes. I want to make sure something like this never happens again. I mean, what can you guys suggest? Is there any way of saving a spin when you get a little bit out of shape like that? I mean, the accident was caused basically by me just giving it a little bit too much gas with the cold tyres, and I felt the rear start to twitch. And once it started getting out of shape, I just couldn't save it. Firstly, the lack of traction just sent me off to the right and onto the grass, much like the accident we saw in my race this afternoon. But then once I was on the grass, I just couldn't keep it controlled, and the car just speared back across the racing line and caused all that devastation. If you do want to rewind the video and watch the live footage again, keep your eye on the inputs at the bottom left of the screen. You'll notice that I didn't apply the brakes at all during the incident. That was deliberate. I wanted to try and avoid locking the brakes up and causing a spin. I thought I'd have a better chance of doing that if I just feathered the accelerator and tried to regain some grip. Obviously it didn't work, but was that the right thing to do? Should I have applied the brakes? I'd really appreciate any and all input you guys can give, because yeah, it's a mistake that I really don't want to be making again anytime soon. Anyway, back to the race, and you'll see that I did come out from the pits to finish, albeit with a very red face. We can see from the classified results that I actually brought it home in 8th place and got myself 31 championship points. But I'm certainly not going to be celebrating any of those achievements after making such a monumental mistake that caused so much mayhem. So with that in mind, let's just jump to the series standings, and we can see after 8 rounds that I'm lying in 12th place in Division 5. But unfortunately for me, week 8 will always be remembered for that huge mistake. And like I said earlier, I'd really appreciate any feedback from you guys on what I could have possibly done differently to avoid that wreck. I mean, I know my main mistake was giving it a little bit too much gas and losing traction, but after that, could I have saved the spin? Could I have avoided the wreck? So please do share your thoughts in the comments below, and for now, I'll say goodbye, and hopefully I'll be back with some safer racing in my next videos at the weekend. Cheers for now, guys. Take care.